The Disney Florida story is a compelling one. And if you go to the Lake County Courthouse in Tavares and you look at the wedding certificates, the very first wedding certificate, marriage license in the history of Lake County, 1887, was to Elias Disney and Flora Call. They married. They homesteaded a piece of property called Kismet, a Turkish word meaning destiny. And as fate would have it, their orange grove froze during the Great Freeze of 1895, arguably Florida's greatest natural disaster. Embittered, Elias took his young bride, joined the Socialist Party, voted for Eugene Debs in 1896, and moved to Chicago, Illinois, where he got part-time work on the Chicago World's Fair as a carpenter. A young son, Walt, was born in 1901 in Chicago. Fearful that Chicago had a corrupting influence on his family, he moved his family to Marceline, Missouri. And I asked the viewers, how many of you have been to Marceline, Missouri? And the answer is almost everyone. Marceline, Missouri is Main Street Disney. Walt Disney wanted to kind of enshrine his ideal youth, which, by the way, he hated farm life, but he wanted to enshrine it. And Main Street Disney, it's pure Disney. It's 5/8 architectural scale to make humans feel like they're in an adult dollhouse. You feel very comfortable walking down Main Street Disney. In 1950, the story is told that what's Walt Disney's brother name? Roy. Okay. In 1950, the story is told that Roy Disney was visiting Cypress Gardens. At the time, Cypress Gardens was one of the most famous tourist destinations in America. Dick Pope had created a dream factory, and Roy Disney was ostensibly there to borrow some props. He had never been to Florida, and he was paying very close attention to the surging crowds. And he asked Dick Pope if he could phone his brother in California. And Dick Pope says, sure. And Dick Pope reported the conversation as going, Walt, this is your brother Roy in Florida. There's a guy here, all he's got is lakes and beautiful women, and he's charging people 25 cents a day. Walt, we should think about Florida someday. So perhaps that's the germ for Disney in Florida. The other story is in the early 1960s, Walt Disney calls Ed Ball in Jacksonville, Florida. Ed Ball arguably is the most powerful Floridian of the 20th century. He got his power and money the old-fashioned way. His sister married a DuPont. And he managed the DuPont land empire in Florida. And by 1960, he had amassed 1 million acres of real estate, much of it in North and Northwest Florida. He disliked the glitter and neon of Miami Beach. He liked Jacksonville, and he had purchased immense amount of land in places like Gulf County and Franklin County. And the conversation went supposedly, Mr. Ball, this is Walt Disney in California. Ed Ball has no idea who Walt Disney is. He didn't see a lot of movies. And Walt Disney said, Mr. Ball, I understand you have a lot of land for sale. Could we talk business? And Ed Ball says, young man, call me back in a week. I'd like to check out your business. So he asked a young clerk, check out this Walt Disney. A week later, Walt Disney called back, Mr. Ball, can we talk business? And Ed Ball replied, son, I don't deal with carnival people. And apparently neither did Walt Disney. When Walt Disney in 1955 created Disneyland, he wanted to create something wholesome, unlike the carnies back in Missouri and the burlesque shows in Kansas City he had seen during World War I. And the mistake he had made, of course, is he had not purchased enough land. I think Disneyland only has 80 acres. and it was such a smash hit. So much so that Nikita Khrushchev threw a hissy fit in the late 50s when he couldn't enter Disneyland because of security. But it was just a smash hit. Walt Disney wished to recreate a Disneyland on the East Coast. His first choice was probably St. Louis, but that was botched because of bad relationship between Augie Bush and Walt Disney over beer sales. But the idea that Disney World could have existed at Port St. Joe is not that improbable. Walt Disney wanted a place with lots of cheap land. I think he paid $180 an acre for the land in Central Florida. He wanted lots of cheap land. He wanted to be near an interstate highway. Interstate 10 was poised across West Florida. And he wanted a non-unionized workforce. That would have been a problem, but build it and they would have come. And but as it was, Disney World is placed at Lake Buena Vista, the happiest place in the world, or so it goes. On November 22nd, 1963, a rather interesting date, Walt Disney first flew over Central Florida to look for a site. And the story has it that he looked out in the Central Florida landscape and saw these rolling meadows and cypress ponds and cattle ranches. But he also saw where an airport could be expanded. He saw where Interstate 4, he could see on the east and west coast, I-4 and I-95 and I-75. And supposedly he said, this is it, X marked the spot. And in fact, he purchased, 80,000 acres of land. I better check that out. But Central Florida is a legacy of Disney World. There's no doubt about it. When you bring in 40 million tourists a year to Disney and the other sites, that is a extraordinary challenge, to say the least.